as The Chosen Season 5 Episode 2 begins. We're still sitting at that fateful table, the Last Supper, but this time we're rewinding the clock. The atmosphere is heavy and you can feel it. Every word Jesus speaks seems to carry the weight of what's about to happen. Even though most of the disciples still don't fully understand, he doesn't start with comfort. He starts with confrontation. Will you lay down your life for me? It's not just a question, it's a mirror. He's forcing Peter and all of them to look inward. And when Peter boldly proclaims he would die for Jesus, the answer is devastating. Truly, truly, I say to you, the rooster will not crow until you have denied me 3 times. The silence that follows feels like it could shatter glass. Because in that moment, Jesus isn't just speaking to Peter, he's speaking to all of them. He's telling them that the loyalty they think they have will crumble under pressure. And that's when it hits youth. This isn't a story about failure. It's a story about human weakness and divine love that sees through it all. The disciples are caught off guard, but Jesus continues. He reminds them of when he sent them out to buy no money, no sandals, just faith. Back then, the people welcomed them. The message was new. The opposition was limited. But that season is over. From now on, Jesus says, it will be different. And you can feel the shift. The tension rises because what he's saying is clear. The world that once ignored them will now hate them. The mission is no longer a calling, it's confrontation. They'll need money, supplies, and even swords. Not to fight, but to survive. And that's where the deeper meaning lies. This isn't about violence, it's about preparation. About knowing that faith doesn't shield you from pain. It gives you the strength to walk through it. Simon the Zealot is the first to respond. He pulls out 2 swords. He thinks they're ready, but Jesus simply replies, it is enough. That line, it lingers. It's not about the number of weapons. It's about the readiness of the heart. And Jesus knows they're not ready. Not yet. But they will be. After they fall. After they fail. That's the mystery of this entire scene. Jesus sees every betrayal, every moment of fear and flight. And still he loves them. Still he dines with them. Still he entrusts them with his mission. That's what makes this moment so powerful. It's not just prophecy. It's mercy. Then comes Nathanael, voicing what all of them must be thinking. Why are you leaving? His voice trembles. His eyes search for answers. Why do we need all this when we have you? And in that one question, we see the heart of the disciples. They don't want to lead. They don't want to fight. They want to follow. They want to remain students, not soldiers. But Jesus is making it clear they are about to become the very foundation of the movement. And they'll have to carry that burden without him physically beside them. That fear, the fear of being left behind, it's in all of us. And that's why this moment is so relatable. Because who among us hasn't asked God, why are you silent now when I need you the most? The camera doesn't need to move. The lighting doesn't need to shift. The words alone are enough to break us. You will all fall away because of me. Tonight, he says it plainly. No riddles, no parables. Just truth. And the weight of that truth is enough to crush their spirits. They don't believe him. Not yet. But he knows what's coming. The garden, the betrayal, the scattering, the silence. And despite all of it, he chooses them. Again and again. Even in their weakness, he calls them his dot. This is what makes the Chosen's portrayal of Jesus so powerful. It doesn't hide from the humanity of the disciples. It embraces it. It shows us their flaws, their confusion, their panic. But it also shows us Jesus steady, sorrowful, and yet filled with unstoppable love. The moment we're witnessing isn't just historical, it's eternal. Because the same God who told Peter he would fall is the same God who built his church. On Peter's redemption, that's not weakness, that's grace. And it's the heart of the gospel. And so, as episode 2 closes this backward view of the Last Supper, we're left haunted by those words, you will all fall away. Not because they spell doom, but because they remind us that failure isn't the end. It's the place where redemption begins. What makes this episode so haunting isn't just what Jesus says, it's what he doesn't say. It's the silence between the lines. The moments where the disciples look at each other, confused, trying to understand what's happening, while knowing deep down that something is about to break. When Jesus tells them to bring swords, to carry money bags, to prepare for hostility, it's not just a logistical update. It's a spiritual alarm. He's telling them the storm is coming, that the road ahead is no longer filled with cheering, crowds, and open doors. It's rejection, betrayal, persecution, and, yes, even death. But here's the tension that The Chosen captures so well. Jesus isn't panicking. He's calm. Even while his words shake the room, his presence anchors it. And the disciples, though confused, are still hanging on to every word. When Simon the Zealot says, "We have 2 swords," it's almost comical, like a soldier, proudly announcing they're ready for war, not realizing the battle ahead is not of flesh and blood. And when Jesus replies, "It is enough," he doesn't mean the swords are truly sufficient for physical defense. He means enough of this, enough distraction, enough trying to prepare in ways that miss the point. Because no weapon can shield them from what's coming. Only faith can. Only obedience. Only surrender, and still they don't see it. How could they? They're sitting in a room with the Messiah. They've watched him calm storms, raise the dead, silence demons. They can't imagine him being taken away, much less executed. But Jesus is no longer speaking of possibility. He's speaking of certainty. He knows the cross is near. He knows Judas has already made his choice. And the weight of that knowledge sits heavy in the room, even if the others haven't felt it yet. The Chosen doesn't need dramatic music or special effects to make this moment powerful. It relies on the quiet grief in Jesus' eyes, the growing fear in his friends, and the scriptures he gently fulfills in real time. When he quotes, "And he was numbered with the transgressors," he's already placing himself in the hands of the enemy, not as a victim, but as a sacrifice, willingly, lovingly, and still. The disciples don't understand. They're thinking of swords. He's thinking of salvation. They're thinking of how to fight. He's preparing to die. But this is what makes the scene so human. We've all been there thinking we're ready for what God is calling us into, only to find ourselves completely overwhelmed. We think we've got what we need: the tools, the plans, the weapons. And then life hits. Tragedy strikes. People betray us. Things fall apart. And in that moment, we realize we misunderstood the mission. Jesus isn't sending us out with swords to conquer. He's sending us out with hearts ready to serve, to suffer, to sacrifice just like he did. And even though the disciples don't fully get it yet, we see the seeds being planted. Seeds that will one day grow into boldness and faith, but not yet. First, they will fall. They will run. They will weep. And still, he will love them. This episode doesn't give us easy answers. It doesn't tie things up with a bow. It leaves us in the tension, because that's where real faith is forged in. The waiting, in the confusion, in the silence before the storm. And as the episode pulls us further back into the moments before Jesus is arrested, we're reminded that even the strongest of believers can break. Even the closest followers can fail. But with Jesus, that failure is never final. The same hands that will soon be bound by Roman guards are the hands that will later restore Peter, forgive Thomas, and send the Spirit to empower them all. So when he says, "It is enough," maybe he isn't just talking about the swords. Maybe he's saying that his love is enough, his plan is enough. And even though the night is about to fall, morning will come, because grace always rises with the sun. There's something deeply unsettling in this episode that you might not even notice at first, but once you do, you can't unsee it. Judas is gone, and no one is saying his name. It's like a shadow has crept into the room, unspoken but heavy, and every disciple feels the weight of it without fully understanding why. When John says, "There are only 11 of us," it's more than a head count. It's a realization that something has fractured. Something sacred is unraveling. Judas, who just hours ago was reclining at the table, breaking bread with the Messiah, is now somewhere out there in the dark doing something that none of them can even imagine. But Jesus knows. He's known from the beginning. And that knowledge is etched in every quiet pause, every lingering look, every warning he gives. The Chosen doesn't need to show Judas yet his absence says more than his presence ever could. It's the silence that screams. The empty space where a friend used to be. The betrayal hasn't happened yet, not in full, but spiritually, it's already begun. The atmosphere in the upper room has changed. Tension is thick. Every word Jesus speaks is layered with sorrow, urgency, and love. But it's also clear he's preparing them for heartbreak. And that heartbreak begins with Judas. For Jesus, this isn't just prophecy being fulfilled, it's personal. He loved Judas. He washed his feet. He trusted him with the money bag. He called him friend. And yet, Judas will be the one to kiss him and hand him over. That kind of betrayal doesn't just hurt, it breaks something inside. And that's the tension Jesus is carrying in this moment. He's still teaching, still comforting, still leading. But underneath, his heart is bleeding. For the disciples, it's confusion. They don't know what's coming. They don't know that in just hours, The garden will be filled with soldiers, and one of their own will lead them there. They're trying to understand why Jesus keeps talking about leaving, about suffering, about dying. And they can't put the pieces together, because the picture doesn't match their expectations. They thought they were heading toward a kingdom with thrones, and power, and glory. Instead, they're walking toward a cross. And Judas, the one who shared their dreams, has slipped away into the shadows to betray all of it. Yet still, no one says his name. The fear is too thick. The truth is too painful. And maybe that's the brilliance of The Chosen in this episode. It doesn't rush to show Judas because it knows what we know, that his absence is louder than any line he could speak. We feel it. We feel it in Peter's desperation, in Nathanael's questions, in Simon's sword. Everyone's trying to make sense of the chaos beginning to swirl around them, but Jesus, he's steady, heartbroken, yes, but unshaken. He knows what Judas will do, and he knows what the Father will do in response. That's the tension that holds the story together. Betrayal and redemption. Death and resurrection. Fear and faith woven together in a single evening that will change everything. This episode doesn't just tell us a story, it invites us into a heartbreak we've all known. We've all felt the sting of someone walking away. We've all seen people who once walked closely with God turn away for reasons we can't understand. And yet Jesus still loves, still serves, still sacrifices. He doesn't shield himself from the pain, he walks straight into it. And as we watch this moment unfold in The Chosen, we're reminded that grace isn't just for the faithful, it's for the betrayers too, for Judas. There was still a chance, a moment, a breath, but he chose differently. And that choice, though tragic, becomes a doorway through which salvation enters the world. The room feels smaller now. The air is heavier, the cross is closer, and the one who should be standing beside Jesus is missing. But even in that absence, the plan of heaven is moving forward, because nothing, not betrayal, not failure, not fear can stop what's about to happen. And that is the bittersweet hope of this episode, that even when people walk away, God never does. And then comes the moment that cuts deeper than any sword. The moment Jesus tells Peter that before the rooster crows, he will deny him 3 times. You can almost hear the crack in Peter's voice, the disbelief, the defiance. Lord, I will lay down my life for you. It's not a lie. He means it. But meaning it doesn't make it true. Because love, when tested by fear, doesn't always hold steady. And this is the heartbreaking beauty of Peter's journey. He's so full of fire, so loyal, so brave. Until he isn't. Until the fire turns to panic and loyalty gives way to survival. The Chosen doesn't just treat this like a prophesied, treats it like a gut punch. Because we know what's coming. We know Peter will fail. And yet, Jesus doesn't cast him aside. He doesn't shame him. He simply looks at him with love and says, "Will you really lay down your life for me?" It's not a taunt. It's a sorrowful knowing. A quiet whisper of what's ahead. What makes this moment so powerful is how human it feels. Peter is all of us. The one who swore he'd never walk away. The one who said, "I'll follow you anywhere," only to crumble when things got dark. And Jesus knows. He knows Peter's strength. And he knows his breaking point, and still he chooses him. Still, he believes in him. Still, he sees beyond the failure to the restoration that will come later. That's the kind of love that doesn't make sense to the world. The kind that sees you at your worst and still calls you to your best. When Jesus looks Peter in the eye and tells him what will happen, he isn't trying to shame him, he's preparing him. Because after the denial, after the tears, after the resurrection, Peter will remember. He'll remember this moment. He'll remember the look in Jesus' eyes. And that memory will break him, but it will also rebuild him. And this is where The Chosen shines. It doesn't rush to the moment of denial. It lets us sit in the tension, in Peter's confidence, in his unshakable loyalty. We feel the weight of what he's promising. We want to believe him. And maybe part of us even thinks just this once. Maybe the story will be different. Maybe Peter won't fail this time. But he will. He has to. Because without the fall, there is no rise. Without the denial, there is no forgiveness. And without the breaking, there is no rebuilding. That's how grace works. It meets us in the rubble. And that's what's so devastating and beautiful. About this scene, Jesus sees the fall coming, and he loves Peter anyway. This isn't just about Peter's denial, it's about how Jesus walks with us through our worst moments. How he sees every weakness in us and still entrusts us with his mission. It's about how failure doesn't disqualify us because in Christ, failure is never the end of the story. It's just the place where a new chapter begins. And that's the hope hidden in this painful moment, that when Peter falls, when he weeps bitterly, when he thinks it's all over, Jesus will rise, and he'll come back for him. Not with judgment, but with breakfast on the shore, with love in his eyes, and with a calling that hasn't changed. So as Peter stares at Jesus, full of pride and devotion, not yet knowing what's coming, we ache for him, because we know the fire that burned so brightly in him is about to be tested in the cold night air of Gethsemane. But we also know something else, something Peter doesn't know yet, that the same mouth that will curse and deny will one day preach to thousands, that the hands that will tremble with fear will one day heal the sick, and that the man who runs away will one day die for the very name he once tried to escape. That's the power of grace. That's the love of Jesus. And that's the quiet miracle in this episode of The Chosen. As the episode closes, there's a stillness that hangs in the air, but it's not peace. It's the calm before a storm. Every word Jesus speaks carries a weight that feels almost unbearable. He's no longer teaching parables or performing miracles for the crowds. Now, he's preparing his closest friends for the darkest hours of their lives. And the most devastating part? They don't fully understand what's coming. Not yet. Not Peter, not Nathaniel, not John. They hear the words about swords, about persecution, about him going away, but they don't grasp the depth of the pain that's only moments away. In these final, intimate conversations, The Chosen shows USA Jesus, who is both divine and heartbreakingly human. He's the Son of God. Yes, but he's also a man who's about to be abandoned, betrayed, and brutalized. And still, he loves, still, he gives, still, he stays present with the very people who will run from him. This episode isn't loud or flashy, it doesn't rely on spectacle or action, but it leaves you shaken. Because it takes you into the eye of the emotional storm, the unbearable tension of knowing what's ahead and choosing to walk into it anyway. Jesus isn't just aware of the suffering coming for him, he's embracing it. Not because he wants to, but because we need him to. And that's the beauty of this moment. He's preparing the disciples for heartbreak, for fear, for failure. But he's also preparing them for resurrection, for joy, for the coming of the Spirit. That's what makes The Chosen Season 5 so emotionally powerful. This constant weaving of sorrow and hope, of death and life. It reminds us that God doesn't skip the pain to get to the glory. He goes through it, fully, willingly, lovingly. Every quiet beat of this episode points toward the cross. But beyond that, it points to something even greater, the empty tomb. Jesus speaks of swords and trials and hatred from the world, yes, but he also promises help, peace, and victory. He talks about going away, but also about sending a helper. He prepares them to be hated, but reminds them they are chosen. He speaks of dying, but with the calm assurance of someone who knows he will rise. This isn't the end of the road. It's the beginning of a revolution that will change the world. And that's the promise that lives in the silence of this episode. The storm is coming. The betrayal is coming. The denial is coming. But so is the resurrection. So is the Spirit. So is the kingdom. And maybe that's what The Chosen wants us to remember most in Season 5. Episode 2, not just the heartbreak of what's happening, but the hope of what's next. In our own lives, we often sit in rooms filled with tension, filled with confusion, filled with things we don't understand. We ask why. We feel abandoned. We face trials we didn't expect. And in those moments, Jesus still whispers the same truth he gave the disciples. Asterisk, I have told you these things, so that in me you may have peace. In this world, you will have trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. This episode ends not with resolution, but with anticipation. We're on the edge of Gethsemane now. The betrayer is in motion, the swords are counted, the hearts are heavy, but even in the darkness, the light is coming. And as The Chosen leads us closer to the cross, it also leads us closer to the greatest miracle of all, that love would lay itself down and rise again. Share your thoughts in the comments and subscribe our channel for more updates. Thanks.